Right, these videos will be a series of discussion videos where it's not about summarizing exactly what happens in the chapter. There are plenty of summaries out there. It's really just looking page by page at important quotes, important things that have been stated, having a little discussion around them, so that hopefully by the end of each video you'll not only know what happens in that chapter, but have a good understanding of why what is said is important. And also, once you've read the novel or you've read further, you'll be able to see that that was foreshadowing, or we can make a comment about that point based on what we know that happens later in the novel. I'll be using this version of the Picture of Dorian Gray, so the page numbers refer to this edition. And yeah, let's get on with it. I have a picture here from the movie. Throughout the series, I will use some screenshots or pictures from the 2009 movie. Please do not use that movie as a reference point. It does not follow the order of the narrative of the novel itself, and it jumps around, it leaves out things, it adds things. It's not the same. But just to give you a visual, guys often find that helpful. So let's look at chapter 1, a couple of things that we can first comment on from the very first few pages. So we set in Basil Hallward's studio, and we've got Basil and Lord Henry, who's also known as just Harry, and they are in the studio talking. Dorian is not there at the moment. You look on page 7. In the center of the room, clamped on an upright easel, stood the full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty. So before we've met Dorian Gray, we know that he's a very good-looking guy, and also that Basil is doing a very good job, and he's a very good painter because he's able to paint this portrait that's so lifelike. Of course, he is painting so well because he has the fuel and the energy of his adoration for Dorian, and the fact that he wants to please Dorian with this painting. And he's got like a new step in his or a new bounce in his step, as it were, a new joy for life, in that he's able to feel such a connection with Dorian, and it's fueling his desire to paint really, really well. Lord Henry says, "It is your best work, Basil, the best thing you have ever done. You must certainly send it next year to the Grosvenor, or the Grosvenor." And that's just an art gallery in England. And Basil says, "I know you will laugh at me, but I really can't exhibit it. I have put too much of myself into it." And we're going to discuss that a little bit later. But in the preface, it very interestingly says, if I can just find it over here quickly, to reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. So you must just paint art or create art, and it must be observed and appreciated for what it is, and it must not be a reflection of the artist. But now here Basil is saying, no, the painting actually is a reflection of the artist, and it's reflecting me and my idolatry, or the fact that I idolize Dorian, and I don't want people to see that. I don't want people to think that about me. Page 8, Lord Henry says, "Too much of yourself in it. I really can't see any resemblance between you and this young Adonis, this like Greek statue, this really model, good-looking man. And you, well, of course you have intellectual expression and all that, but beauty." So within that little bit of text there, we can see two things. First of all, Lord Henry is not afraid of telling Basil, not very subtly, that you're not very good looking, and that you don't look anything like Dorian, and that, well, I don't think anybody's going to pick up any form of you in this painting because you are nothing like Dorian. And then he says, well, Basil, you're intellectual, you're clever and all that. Now that "and all that" statement is like belittling, in saying that, well, intelligence is all of that kind of stuff is not really important, but beauty is what is most important. And now that all links into the aestheticism, the belief that beauty is everything, and that beauty in youth, which we'll learn about a little bit later in chapter 2, is far more important, apparently, than having any form of high intellect. Lord Henry continues to say, "The moment one sits down to think, one becomes all nose, all forehead, or something horrid." So in other words, once you start thinking, or you take something seriously, or you have a discussion or something intellectual, you become horrible. And is it because you become not naive, or that you become insightful into the realities of the world, and therefore you become horrid? That doesn't really make sense. How perfectly hideous all the successful men in learned professions are. And I don't think we can believe everything that Lord Henry says here. Lord Henry also says on page 8, your mysterious young friend never thinks. He is some brainless, beautiful creature. So based on Lord Henry's, fascinating yet cynical and rather dangerous theory, if you are beautiful, then you clearly don't think much at all. And so because Dorian Gray is so handsome, he clearly doesn't think at all. And then lastly, as I've put there, which is really quite savage, Lord Henry says to Basil, don't flatter yourself, you're not in the least like Dorian. In other words, you don't look like Dorian at all, you're not good looking like him, and you think far too much. Dorian obviously doesn't think that much. Page 10, Basil says, you never say a moral thing. You never say anything about that's good. And you never do a wrong thing. Yet I don't ever see you actually acting badly. Your cynicism is simply a pose. Now your cynicism is when you have like a distrust of the motives of others. You believe that people are motivated by doing something that's good for themselves, And he's saying that, I don't think, Lord Henry, you always actually mean what you say. Or you certainly don't put in practice everything that you say. Basil continues to go on and say, every portrait that is painted with feeling, which is what he has done with this Dorian Gray portrait, is a portrait of the artist, not of the sitter. And again, that's contradictory to what Oscar Wilde says in the preface. It is not he who is revealed by the painter, it is rather the painter who on the coloured canvas reveals himself. Again, not what's said in the preface. The reason I will not exhibit this picture is that I'm afraid I have shown in it the secret of my own soul. Now, being set at the time, 1900, homosexuality was seen as like a sin. It was like illegal, and so if anybody was going to pick up that, Basil, this painter, looks like he was in love with Dorian based on, the painting that he's done. And again, Basil's idolatry of Dorian. He thinks that he doesn't want anybody to pick up on that, or put two and two together and kind of come to that conclusion. And so he says, although he hasn't stated it directly to Lord Henry, he has said, I'm not exhibiting this painting. And pages 11 to 13 is all about Basil telling Lord Henry how he met Dorian 2 months ago at Lady Brandon's, and you can go and read up about that, and how he was just awestruck when he saw Dorian and he just had to meet him and all that. Page 14, Lord Henry says, again, one of these epigrams, these witty, clever little sayings. I choose my friends for their good looks, my acquaintances for their good characters, and my enemies for their good intellects. I have not got one who is a fool. And we think to ourselves, why would you choose your friends for your good looks? That's very vain, Okay, you do that so it makes you look better, so that you're surrounded by good-looking people that recognize you and accept you, so you look good. But really, should your friends be friends just because they're good looking? That doesn't say anything about their character. But clearly to Lord Henry that doesn't matter. His acquaintances for their good characters. Okay, so he wants to surround himself with people who are good people, who have good personas and characters, but he's not exactly going to go out to dinner with them. And my enemies, people who he likes to argue against, must have good intellects. Because if you argue with somebody who doesn't have a brain, or such as not really very intellectual, doesn't really have much to say, then what kind of argument is that? They're not going to be able to argue back. So that tells us about Lord Henry's character, that he's argumentative and toxic and immoral in the things that he says, and these epigrams, and he's hoping to get as good as he gives. So that's why he has to have these enemies who don't agree with what he says, need to be intellectual enough. Then there's this whole discussion about how he doesn't care for his brothers, and there's something about his older ones never stop dying and the younger ones do nothing else, or won't die, or something like that. So there's no loyalty or love shown there for his family. He says, I can't help detesting my relations, actually. I suppose it comes from the fact that none of us can stand other people having the same faults as ourselves. And we say, well, is that true or not? I mean, usually we can relate to people who have the same fault as ours because, we can understand what they're going through. We can sympathize and empathize. But here he's saying, you know what? I hate people who have the same faults as me. So I don't want to have anything to do with them. Then page 15, Basil says, I couldn't be happy if I didn't see Dorian every day. He's absolutely necessary to me. So clearly Basil is infatuated with Dorian, and also, as I said earlier, Dorian is fueling his ability to paint so well. And Lord Henry said, compared to that landscape that you did the other day, this is the best thing you've ever done, which he says a little bit later. He is all my art to me now. So literally, he is my art because of the painting. Page 15, again, Basil says there's nothing that art cannot express. And that, again, goes to the preface. The work that I have done since I met Dorian Gray is the best work of my life. And that's probably true. I see things differently. I think of them differently. And, if you think about when you're infatuated with somebody, or you meet somebody and you have a crush on them, or they are interested in you, and it's the start of a new relationship, you're so alive, you are so excited and have a new taste for life that you suddenly perform at your best, because it really does give you a bounce in your step. Page 16, Basil says, I see everything in Dorian. I find him in the curves of certain lines, the loveliness and subtleties of certain colors. Everywhere he goes, he's just seeing Dorian. That's how special and how meaningful the relationship is to him. At this point, Dorian has never met Lord Henry. He's just friends with Basil, and he sees him every day because Dorian has to stand there while Basil paints him. And so that friendship is going really, really well and means everything to Basil. Page 16 as well, Basil says, Dorian knows nothing about it, the fact that I like him so much. He shall never know anything about it. But, well, we'll see about that. If you've read further, you'll know. But the world might guess it, and I will not bare my soul to the shallow, prying eyes. My heart shall never be put under their microscope. There is too much of myself in the thing, Harry, too much of myself. And he's reiterating why he will never display this painting. Basil says on page 17, the world shall never see my portrait of Dorian Gray. That's interesting choice of words, because later on we know that the portrait is given to Dorian, but then Dorian actually hides the painting away, so the world doesn't see it, but not for the reason that Basil doesn't want it to be shown, but the world won't see it later on because Dorian will put it away somewhere. If you've read further, you'll know, but he's going to put it and hide it in the upper room, and so that no prying eyes can look at his soul. Basil says, as long as I live, the personality of Dorian Gray will dominate me. And that is pretty much the truth right there. For as long as I live, anyway. You can't feel what I feel. You change too often. Basil has insight into Lord Henry's character. He understands what type of person Lord Henry is, that he says one thing and means the opposite, or he'll say this today and tomorrow he'll contradict himself. You change too often. And so Basil is not caught up in the lies and these delightful, as they're called, theories of Lord Henry, unlike Dorian will be and most of Lord Henry's friends. And then near the end of the chapter, page 19, Lord Henry remembers where he's heard this Dorian name before, and he was like, oh yes, it was at my aunt Lady Agatha's. Now he knows. But when he thinks about it, he says, well, when I first heard about Dorian Gray, I thought this. She said that he was very earnest and he had a beautiful nature. Beautiful nature, in other words, nice person. I at once pictured to myself a creature, use of diction here, with spectacles and lank hair, horribly freckled and tramping about on huge feet. So according to Lord Henry and the theory that we discussed in the previous few slides, if somebody is a good person, has a good character, friendly, helpful, kind, well-mannered, etc., they're probably not good looking. And that's obviously very, very wrong. But Lord Henry is saying, well, that's the type of person that I pictured as soon as she said beautiful nature. Basil says, I don't want you to meet him. And Basil's right for saying that, because Basil knows that Lord Henry is a terrible influence, and a lot of what he says is immoral. And he knows also that if Lord Henry meets Dorian, Dorian might be more interested in Lord Henry, and then the friendship between Basil and Dorian will be weakened, which it is later, and that will upset Basil. But Basil's also looking out for Dorian. He knows that Dorian is going to be easily influenced because he's naive and young, and he really doesn't want Dorian to suffer under Lord Henry's cynical epigrams. Then at the end of the chapter, the butler announces that Dorian Gray has in fact arrived at Basil's studio, and Basil says to Lord Henry, almost like as a plea, don't spoil him, don't try to influence him, your influence would be bad. And that is true. Unfortunately, Lord Henry does spoil Dorian, he does influence him, and his influence is most certainly bad, as we'll see. So once I've read further in the novel, I can see that, well, that line is in fact pure foreshadowing. And that ends chapter 1 of The Picture of Dorian Gray.